Death is the unyielding truth that binds us all, an inevitable, profound, and deeply intimate encounter with the finite nature of life. It arrives without warning, shattering the world we thought we knew. In its wake, grief emerges, often dismissed as something to fix or get over. But what if grief, in its suffocating pain, is not a burden to carry or something from which we need to move on? What if grief is instead a sacred invitation, an opening to feel more deeply, to connect in unimaginable ways, and to transform all that we knew to be true? I'm Laura Walton, and I'm so grateful you're here. Together, let's step into the uncharted terrain of death and grief, not as something to fear or avoid, but as a force that shapes us, breaks us, and ultimately remakes us. Let's meet it not with resistance, but with curiosity and courage. And let's do this on purpose. Okay. Well, hello. Thank you for being here. This is our first episode of the Grief on Purpose podcast. So it's very exciting. Did you realize that was what was happening?
I read through the email, so I did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our first guest here we have today, Jessica Jurgens. I'd love for you, Jess, just to kind of share like your perspective on how we know each other.
Sure. So I know you through my cousins. I have 4 girl cousins who all live in the Scottsdale, Phoenix, Paradise Valley area, and we met when we were kids. I believe you're in the same grade as my cousin Brooke, and yeah, so I was a grade beneath you guys, but we all attended school in the same school district, and I'd see you at parties, and yeah, so just a childhood fixture.
I forgot about those party days. Yeah. Okay. Well, and can you just share a little bit about who you are, maybe kind of where you live, what you do with your life?
Yeah, so I live in Brooklyn, so New York City. I'm in Greenpoint. Um, I just finished a nursing program. I decided to go back to school for something completely different than I had been doing. So it was an accelerated nursing program. I actually start my first job in this field 2 weeks from today. I'm going to be. I got offered a position with Mount Sinai in the operating room, so I'm really excited to have something that is at a hospital that's you know magnet affiliated, that has a really good reputation, where it enables me to help people on their healing process and healing journey. And for fun, I play music. I haven't been doing so much of that during my nursing program, but I've always been in bands, and I play bass and sing, and then I also do get some guitar, and I've even played drums for my fiance's band on the rarest of occasions.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my life these days. Just gearing up for going back to work. I'm getting married in a week and a half as well, in Arizona, traveling back there for
That's
that.
why you're coming.
Yeah. Actually, at my aunt and uncle's house.
Yeah. I heard mention of that a while back that you were going to do it there. So I'm sure that'll be a beautiful wedding.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I didn't realize that you had gone to nursing school. Is there something that contributed to your choice to do that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that contributed to that. I in my adult life, I've always worked management positions in a retail setting, as well as I've done some recruiting over the years. And I always like jobs where I feel like I'm making a difference in the day to day, but I wanted something that was, one, in part recession proof. I would say 2, where you're compensated well for your skill, and then 3, like where you're helping people who when they're in their most vulnerable, and you're able to make a huge difference. Everyone I've talked to, I also have both of my parents are nurses. I don't know if you knew that, but my mom had done it straight out of high school, gone to nursing school, and my dad did similar to the way I did it, where he went back to school in his late 30s, early 40s. So it was a career change. Um, I had a kind of inkling to do this years ago, but it seemed just kind of daunting the first time around at the school. I went to Arizona State for fine arts. So it's kind of like a 180 from what I had been doing. And um, not having the prerequisites complete and having very very few of my classes transferable, it made it seem hard. So like I didn't do it at 30 like I had initially thought of, and I kind of kept pushing it back. And I just got to thinking, I'm like, why am I waiting? It's so, it was like I started off baby steps. I enrolled in prerequisites at a community college just to keep it cheap for that. And I was just going to take a couple of night classes, and I thought, screw it. I'm just going to jump all in. I quit my full-time job, went back to working or to being in school full-time, like insane science classes that I had never thought I would take in my life, like microbiology and or anatomy and physiology 1 and 2 and stuff like that. And yeah, quit my full-time job, got a part-time job walking distance from me to keep it easy. And yeah, rest is history.
Well, congratulations. I'm sure that was a big endeavor.
It was. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you think that, your interest in doing that, does that have anything to do with your experiences with grief and death, or is that completely separate?
Um, I I think they do. Um, I don't know. For me, especially the after pushing it off for so long, being very I've become very thankful for my time here, like, um, in this realm. And I sometimes I think back about the people I've lost and how they weren't able to complete some of the dreams that they had, and it's been a little bit of a catalyst.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a motivation for you to follow those dreams, to pursue what you're
Yeah.
interested in. Yeah.
I would say as well, like, my grandpa, who was like a second father to me, I would go when he was sick before he passed, being one of the relatives who lived closest to him, and seeing him in the hospital and seeing him receive some really phenomenal care, and then seeing him receive some care that left a little to be desired, or him treated a little subpar, was also a catalyst. And knowing that, um, sometimes the interaction that the health professionals have with the family can make all of the difference in how you remember that experience. Not only obviously for the patient, but with death that might be impending, how you remember it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that the role you play in that can be such a huge pivotal role that will impact people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good kind of segue into just I'd like to ask you to share just whatever it is you feel comfortable sharing with about the deaths that you've experienced, who those people are, who they were to you, and what those experiences were.
Yeah, so I would say one that was very pivotal in shaping maybe who I am as a person, but also like my thoughts on death and the way I've experienced it. I was in a car accident on the school lunch hour, um, when I was a junior, and, unfortunately, we were T-boned, and, 2 of my best friends were in the car with me, and, well, I only spent the day in the emergency department. One of my friends spent weeks there, and my other friend passed away, and, yeah, it's weird because as a 16-year-old, maybe you've experienced the death of grandparents, or somebody who was sick, and um so you have time to prepare, or you not saying that a death of a grandparent isn't sad, um but when it's somebody your own age and so abrupt, um and you don't anticipate the level of grief you're going to be feeling, um, it can definitely be difficult. I definitely saw some therapy back then and might have been on a few antidepressants, but those were kind of short-lived because they made me very tired and I'd fall asleep in class. But I remember I carried this around for a while. I didn't talk to anyone because I felt like I would burden them, or I didn't want to be like the sad girl. I was already a little goth at that point, so yeah, I didn't want to lean that hard into it. But I remember once mentioning that I was going to therapy at probably not the best time to mention it, but when you're a kid, you don't know. I mentioned it in front of a relative, and they were like, "Never admit that." And they're like, "You shouldn't talk about this in front of people." And when you think you're in a safe space,
Mm.
and you're a teenager, and yeah, I think it kind of impacted the way I grieved for a long time. Um, so I didn't talk about that for a while with anyone, and again, the therapy itself was, um, I kind of the way I've always dealt with therapy, like, after going to a few sessions, I'm like, "I'm cured." And then, everyone's so different, and then it's like, sometimes down the road, things resurface. But, yeah, that was a grief that I kind of carried on for a while, and then, like, when my oldest brother had passed away, a couple of years later in 2001, um, and that was as a result of 9/11. He was a first responder, so again, something, you don't really anticipate, because he was only 26, and um, he was a court officer, so it's like that was supposed to be, um, like a safe kind of public servant position. He's not a firefighter responding to fire where you put yourself in danger, or a police officer where there's potential. It's like at the courthouses protecting the people within. So, but because of his proximity to the trade centers, he was in Lower Manhattan, and he was an Army trained medic. Um, that definitely, so that was kind of what pushed him to respond, is he had the training to help people and the desire. Um, so I guess with that having been so abrupt as well, it kind of like it wasn't. I didn't talk a lot about with friends. Like I continued, like I showed up to school. I would play shows like the same week. Um, but I think as well, when people were still hopeful that they would find his body, or not even his body, that people would talk about him like he was still alive, like that same week. And I was like, he's a goner. I think maybe because of what had happened with my friend Franklin, I was just like, I knew instantly. I was like, I don't know. I like didn't, not to get like super like woo, but I'm like, I didn't feel presence.
Yeah.
And
Get woo. Get all the woo you want. Mhm.
so yeah, I think like having like very abrupt, like, out of nowhere, again, wasn't sick. But I think with him, he definitely, because he talked about going back or going to school for nursing. That also um, was something that inspired me to like, you know what? I have time. I'm going to make the best of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we just pause there for a second? Because I have a few
Yeah.
questions already and I don't want to lose
Yeah.
them.
No, no, of
So
course.
your friend who died, what was his name?
His name was Franklin.
Okay. Okay. And so, yeah, as you said, at age 16, that's not even something you can conceptualize, like,
Yeah.
wrapping your mind around a death. Like, what do you remember at that time? What did death even mean to you?
Gosh, I mean, at that age, you really just think that you're so invincible, and like death to me just meant like like somebody had to be sick, or um, it just didn't seem possible for like somebody I knew who was healthy and vibrant. But it's weird, like he spoke about it a lot, Franklin. I remember d- distinctly when we were walking to my car that day. Um, he had mentioned to me that he didn't think he was gonna, like, live to see 16 because he was only 15.
Oh.
Um, and we on numerous occasions, like I had this weird feeling that I was gonna be involved in some sort of accident at some point in my life, but be the only person able to walk out.
Mm.
And so it was weird that that actually happened. Um, and yeah, I don't know if there was some like weird psychicness. I obviously didn't want anything ever like that to happen.
Right. But it's so interesting, I think you had a sense somehow
And
of
he did
of
too.
knowing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of a key thing. Yeah, he was it's weird because the things that you miss, um, like, obviously, just physical presence and being but, like, this was during the time of, like, landlines. So it's like, when it's somebody who you spoke to every single night before you went to bed, and it was like, "No, you hang up," and you're just, like, literally getting our guitars and playing songs for each other. We're like, "I just learned this new Smashing Pumpkins song. Okay, I'm gonna play it for you." Uh, so,
Yeah.
like, grieving things that you wouldn't really imagine. Um, yeah, it was strange, and then having to go back to school. Like, I stayed out of school for a week, and I didn't wanna go back to that school. I didn't wanna go back to that school district, because everyone knew, and, so, yeah, but at his funeral, his aunt came up to me and told me that he would want me to go back.
Mm. Mm.
So,
Yeah. How much do you think about him these days?
um, he crosses my mind quite a bit because you always think about, like, what people would have done or who they were and who they could have been,
Mhm.
and he was so artistic, so musical, and it's funny because I have like, my fiancé made me a mixtape a while ago, like, actually a physical mixtape like they did back in the day, and bought me a tape player, and right next to it on my dresser, I have, a couple weeks before Franklin passed, he had made me a mixtape, and I can't bring myself to listen to it, even though I have a tape player right here. I listened to it back then, but it's like there's certain songs like he put on there, like the Cure love song, and it's like if that comes on, I just like I have to change it. It's like I can't even listen.
Well, why do
Uh,
you think that is?
um, I don't know. It's funny, like certain times in life, things hit you differently, or you see them differently, and I think right now because um, there's like the rites of passage, like, and for me, like I'm with getting married in the next week
Yeah.
and a half. Just something that he was never able to do. It like, I don't know. I can't even hear what's on there. Even though he recorded, a song, some classical song, but it's him playing, like, on the piano. It's really beautiful. I'll listen to it sometime.
Yeah. I love that you still have a tape though, 'cause something that's, just is so outdated as far as technology goes, but you still have that.
Yeah.
Uh,
And literally a reproduction of a tape player from back in the day, but, like, a working cassette tape player that if I wanna listen, when I'm ready to listen again, it's right there.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Then I know your brother, Tommy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know to clarify, I did not know him, but I knew what his name was. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, was dying in 9/11 is a very different circumstance,
Yeah.
than Franklin's death, but also, quite honestly, than a lot of people's deaths. It was a very public, and well-known situation in which a lot of people died. How was that experience, different for you?
The weird thing with it being such an international, I don't know how many people from different countries had passed, like, but, being the World Trade Center and then having the planes as well, you've got people from all over the world involved, because it's such a high profile thing. and living now, I've been back in New York for, it'll be 20 years this summer. Um, it's something like from my window on the week leading up to 9/11, like from where the Twin Towers were, they shoot up these lights that like literally go up to the heavens at night. So it's like from my window, it's a constant reminder. And, you know, people reach out to me that day, and um it's never something like that's escapable. Not that I'm trying to escape anything, but you know, it's strange having somebody always come up to you on a specific day saying like, I'm thinking about you, or I'm thinking about your brother or your family. It's not unwelcomed, but it's weird when you're like, okay, this is the day that like I have to grieve, even though you're always doing it, but for it to be something that's like, for lack of a better word, kind of expected.
Mhm.
With that though, it's weird. It's the last time I saw him alive was at his wedding.
Mm.
Um, because I was back in New York for that back in June of 2001. Um, so I have fond memories, but like it felt like no closure since it was so abrupt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's strange living here and like sometimes walking down the street and like seeing the trade center or One World Trade, whatever they call it, and knowing what used to be there, and because that's not there, that's why he is deceased.
Mm.
But then also yeah, I think it's funny because I randomly look it up every once, like I'll like Google his name, and like some places will have that, like that he was 27, but he was 2.5 months shy of it. And it's weird like seeing things like written on the internet, and people are like, the internet's forever, and seeing like like things that are not congruent with reality.
Mm.
um or seeing like it put that they found his remains, but they didn't find his remains. um they found a piece of his gun, because as court officers, they carried guns, or like part of his badge, but never anything from his body. So it's weird knowing that like mystically, like like if you're like, we're all dust in the end, like he's out there, but there's no like, even though there's a memorial and this, that, and the others, there's like no physical grave. If you're
Yeah.
in somebody who likes to go to a physical grave to mourn. So it's almost just like he vanished.
Ooh, yeah, that is weird. So you never got physical confirmation of his death?
No. But it
Wow.
says online that he that they did find remains, but it was just, like, his gun and badge, and even it was just pieces of it, like, they found, like, a serial number. So, yeah, it's weird to have that out there,
Mhm.
and, like, yeah, the discrepancy with age, but have it not be true.
That is
So,
interesting.
believe everything you read on the internet,
Yeah.
kids.
Public service announcement. Um, yeah, so you were saying a couple minutes ago that you never got confirmation, physical confirmation of his death, but it sounds like there was a period of time immediately following the attacks where your family was kind of just, like, waiting. Is that right? But you had a sense of something?
Yeah, I remember my best friend, Nick, who I'll be seeing next week. He called me, and I was at my boyfriend's house at the time, and it was very early in Arizona, and he's like, "The nation's under attack." And I turned on the news and like saw what was happening, and I like looked over at the guy I was dating at the time, and it was like, "My brother's dead." He's like, "What?"
Mm.
Yeah, it was like a weird, I'm like, I just know. But then I still went to school that day. I was again at Arizona State, and I would ask some professors, I'm like, "Can I leave? Like, we haven't heard from my brother." And at the time, my uncle was a Port Authority commissioner and had an office there. And my dad's cousin also, Paul Jurgens, he also died he was a Port Authority police officer. So technically, I lost two relatives. Um, but yeah, I just felt it instantly.
Mhm. How did you feel? Like, are you able to describe that in more detail, what that felt like?
Um, it's weird. Like, even though I kept trying to call and I just knew no one would answer, and then when I did try and, all the phone lines were down, like, everything would go straight to voicemail or just not ring. Um, but I felt it like, when I would talk to relatives that morning too, like, they're like, when I hear from Tommy, and I was just like, I didn't wanna be like Wednesday Addams being like, "You're not gonna hear from him." But I don't know, it was this weird, like, empty,
Mm,
just like yeah, just like an emptiness. I was like, I called knowing I wouldn't receive an answer.
mm. That's interesting.
Um,
But what that makes me think of, like, and this could obviously be wrong, but, like, when he was alive, in some way you felt, like, his energy, his presence, and then you didn't feel that when he was dead?
I would say, yeah. No, like, yeah, it's funny, I hadn't, like, thought about that much, but I just all of a sudden felt like nothing. So, yeah, maybe I did feel, like, the presence or, like, how sometimes, like, with twins, I mean, obviously, I'm not his twin, he was 7 years older than me, but, like, you, like, feel if something's, like, good or bad is gonna happen. Um, I just went from, like, feeling decent to just knowing I was like, he would be there. He is not alive
Mhm.
anymore. Like,
Did you, from whatever you might have shared with other people, maybe specifically with your family at that time, did it seem like you were the only one who had that sense?
yeah, and it's weird because I'm actually a very optimistic person, and everyone's talking about, everyone was telling stories, like, about him, and they're like, "Oh, he's gonna kill us if when he knows that we shared this story." Um, and I was just like, "He ain't coming back."
Yeah.
But I couldn't say that to anyone, but I knew. But yeah, everyone was not going on like life hadn't changed, but maybe they couldn't face the grief that they knew was coming.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm sometimes I wonder, like, if because of what happened with Franklin and having it being so immediate that, like, being with someone, feeling their presence, talking with them, and then just knowing that that's over. I don't know, maybe I accepted a little sooner than everyone, but yeah, like, it went on for, like, you know, a week, like, "Oh, he's gonna be bummed out if he heard about or when he or, like, this story, that story," "Oh, he'll have something to add to that," and I was just like, "There is no adding to it."
Mm. How did it happen that, because for it sounds like for a little bit there was optimism there and
Yeah.
hopefulness that he was still alive, but then at some point that changed. How did that change?
Um, I think with seeing what happened, like, you know, on the news, it dominated the news for a very long time. Um, but I know personally, like, because my uncle was a Port Authority commissioner at the time, we had access to some places that maybe the general public didn't. And I remember, like, going down to ground zero, like, with my family and seeing, like, literally smoldering heaps, and smelling, like, those smells. And, um, like, for me personally, it just, like, confirmed what I already knew. But I think his wife wasn't, um like, she didn't wanna get a death certificate done. She might have felt a little pressure from my mom, because I think she was the one who I don't know if she had to report something or, uh, I think there's, like, some points of contention within my family and reasons why people might not be talking related to, like, finally admitting because there were 2 different memorials that we had. One, within a week and a half or 2 weeks, I think kind of spurned by my mother's side of the family, and then one in November when his wife, um, was willing to admit, like, that he's not returning. Um, so kind of having to, like, relive that again and have, like, a proper Catholic mass, and, like, you know, I don't know what you call them, like, the little mass cards that have, like, their their birth date and their death date and, like, maybe some prayer. So yeah, it was weird then to, like, come back to New York within 2 months and kind of go through that again.
Yeah.
Um, but that was, like, once she was able to accept his death.
Yeah. Yeah. Very complex. Um,
Yeah.
so many layers of just people approaching it from different ways, not necessarily right or wrong, but just different.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I can't hear bagpipes without crying now because they had the full, like, the bagpipes playing, like, Amazing Grace and "Oh, Tommy Boy," which also seems very apropos,
Yeah.
but also very sad.
Yeah. And I can't believe he was only 26. I mean, I remember um thinking like in my head he was so much older, he was like
Yeah.
40 or something. But 26 is so young. Uh
Yeah, this past November would have been his 50th birthday,
yeah.
which is crazy to think, like I'm like, "Wow, so much time has passed," but then, like, sometimes talking about it, it could have happened today.
Yeah. I know. That's how grief is, huh? The
Yeah.
time is so crazy in grief.
Yeah.
Um, then you were also talking about your grandfather. Is that a death that feels like a significant death to you as well?
It's interesting with that. With my grandpa, and he and Tommy were so close. Um, it's funny, all of my parents' kids at some point, well, there's 4 of us, with the exception of my youngest brother, we've lived with my grandpa at some point. He's kind of been, like, our transition, like, into living in New York.
Mm.
And, so Tommy lived with him, my older brother Joe lived with him, and then I lived with him as well, and Joey and I are the only ones who, sorry, you might hear a car alarm in the background. Okay, it stopped. Um, we're the only ones who overlapped as far as, like, living, with my grandpa, but, I think with that, while I saw it coming, his death, because I had grown so close to him as an adult, um, it's it's something I really cherish. Like, I would w when I lived with him on days where I was working or not working, I would call him, like, a couple hours before he left the law firm, and I'd ask him what he wanted for dinner, and I would cook him dinner every night, and we would eat together and watch Yankee games together, and, I think having parents in the medical field definitely impacted, like, people weren't afraid to tell me, like, you know, like, I looked at these numbers or, like, the way this is progressing, he doesn't have much longer, and he lived to be like, well into his 90s, so, he lived a long, you
Right.
know, life. But, I remember this is kind of a weird thing, like, with my cousins, one of them had asked me, like, "Should I come visit? My mom says he's gonna recover and we'll see him at the holidays." I was like, "Girl, he ain't living to the holidays. So if you wanna see him and you wanna, like, give him a hug and hold his hand and tell him you love him, like, now's the time." And, yeah, once again, having to be, like, somebody who is giving it to you direct.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it hit me a lot harder than I thought it was going to. Again, because he lived a nice, full, long life. Um, but yeah, it felt like I lost a parent, and unfortunately, I do have both of my parents, and, but yeah, it's like it it hit me pretty hard with him.
Yeah.
I think also, like, I keep coming back to, like, weddings and rites of passage, but, like, I'm the only well, aside from my younger cousin, but, like, he's been to all of my cousins' weddings and danced with them, and, like, my grandpa shared such a love of music, like, for every milestone birthday, we'd have a Dixieland jazz band come, and he'd get up and sing with them, and I'd sometimes do a duet with him, um, and he was very, very supportive of, like, me pursuing like music as a passion, even though like he was a lawyer and like very studious. Like he did music on the side when he was younger, and he played in like big bands, and he loved to sing. Um, so yeah, I think growing close to him as, an adult in my 20s, and then seeing that decline, and seeing for people from afar being like, well, we'll see him at the holidays. I'm just like, no, now is the time. And I think that's why I'm very like open with people about like feelings, like telling people I love them or like what they mean to me, is because it's like, A, you don't know how much time you have, but B, like being the person who's always kind of been aware of that. So yeah, I don't like to put things off.
That sounds like that's a way that grief has maybe changed who you are or
Yeah,
how you show up
definitely.
as a person. Yeah. 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 Are there any other significant deaths you've had? Or is it mostly those 3?
It's funny. I mean, well, not funny. Um, when I started my nursing program in 2023, fall of 2023, um, one of my best friends in New York, who he moved to New York the year before me, my friend Charles, um, I had right before that I started my program, I had gone out to lunch with him, and I noticed something had changed. Let me give you a little backstory. Like about 12 years ago, Charles had come over to dinner at my apartment and told me that he had cancer. And we're I was 6 months older than him. So basically the same age for all intents and purposes. We had both gone to Arizona State. I met him in Arizona, and he moved to New York to become a public school teacher. And with him, he had beaten cancer, and then like we get some checks, and and it would come back and then beat it again, and then it came back. And June of 2023, he had come to me and he let me know it was back, but that this time he wasn't gonna pursue treatment anymore. And I was just like, with me, I'm just like, "You have to fight it. You have to do all you can." But it had grown so big and was inoperable. He'd already had, like, brain surgery. Um, and while I was, starting off my first semester of my accelerated program, there were times where, he kind of went downhill fast. Like, I could tell, like, in talking with him, like, he wasn't as, like, emotionally connected, I think because of where the tumor was. Um, but having had a lot of time to deal with that, but he had gone pretty quickly from being able to chat with you and have a conversation just to, like, um just kind of like, being aware of things, but maybe a little more introspective. Um, and so then in November of 2023, like early November, his husband had asked me, he's like, "You wanna come visit?" And there were times where I would go where, like, maybe they didn't have a home health aide, and I would, like, go over for the day and, like, hang out with him. Um, and so I was like, I'll come by Monday." Like, let's say this was Thursday. He's like, "No, you should come over tomorrow if you can."
Mm.
And, so I went over with my fiancé, and I could tell, like, with my nursing training that I had received just in that one semester, I was like, "Oh, he's doing, like, Cheyne-Stokes breathing," and, um, the way he would breathe, I was like, "I don't think he has more than, like, 2 days in him," and just, like, seeing that, so he ended up passing, I think, Monday night, um, and they asked me to do the eulogy at his wedding, Jesus Christ, funeral, um, which was my finals week, and I, of course, did that, um, but it's weird. I think about him all the time, but it's when you can, like, see it coming sometimes, um it doesn't take away from the sadness of it, but I think I was grieving the entire time that it was happening. So when even though it's like he was so young and so beloved by his students. Um, his death hit me in a different way. Um, yeah, I don't know.
In what way?
Um, Again, I think like some people, regardless of whether it's like a sudden, unexpected death or something you have time to process along the way. Um, I think I never saw him seem sad during his cancer treatments. He was always like positive and fun and funny still.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe because it seemed like he had come to terms with whatever was coming his way, it helped me come to terms with what I knew was coming his way,
Yeah.
if that
You
makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. You've had I didn't realize this, but you've had such a broad spectrum of deaths, like, through all different types of circumstances and, relationship to you,
Yeah.
and preparation or not preparation for those. You've kind of covered the spectrum of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having had all of those really varied experiences, is there anything just about grief in general, that has been surprising to you?
Hmm. I think just like when it like you can go like days, weeks, months, years, and it's like you're always gonna miss that person or you're always but the times the things that'll remind you of them, um, and kind of like bring about that grief all over again. It's sometimes it can be an anniversary of sure, like that I think that's like the thing. Although it's weird, I hate calling it anniversary because it sounds so celebratory when you think of an anniversary sometimes. But sometimes you can just be reading something and it triggers, or you listen to, like, that song, like, how I can't even listen to a love song because like, even though I miss Franklin so dearly and I love him, like, that one, it's just, like, instant tears.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think the things that trigger it, that triggered, like, the resurgence of grief, because, like, as I mentioned earlier, like, when I Googled my brother, that happened to have been this morning, when I was going to meet a friend for breakfast. And I was on the subway, and for some reason, yeah, seeing that they had his age wrong,
Mhm.
like, that one thing, because I was like, Who would you even contact? Does it even it doesn't matter to other people. Why is this the thing that's, like, making me well up in tears on the train?"
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting and so, unpredictable and
Yeah, I think that's probably what I would say is, like, the unpredictability of grief.
yeah.
Like, you can go for a long time and just you're like, "I feel great. Everything's good." Like, I've dealt with the grief, and then it's kind of, like, cyclical sometimes
Mhm.
or unexpected.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. What what, if any, ways would you say that you have kind of dealt with the grief, quote, unquote?
Yeah, so I think kind of throwing myself into a new career where I feel like I can be of use to people, um, because I think that's like, the people I've lost along the way, I feel like that's something that they were very helpful for their communities. So, like, I volunteer a lot, um, more so than usual right now because, since I hadn't been working, since I had that time between graduating, taking my board exams, passing, and then just, like, now I'm, like, killing some time. So, for me, I like to volunteer a lot, and I've been volunteering with North Brooklyn Angels. So they help people, like, in the community, like, there's people who I see on the street when I'm, like, walking my dog who come and benefit from their services. So it's, doing meal prep for, like, food insecure,
Mm.
um, and, um, yeah, passing out meals. So sometimes we do hundreds a day for people, and whether I'm doing it in the kitchen or going out and, like, with the food pantry items and for people who, in your local community who need them, it's been something that's beneficial. I try like in my head when I'm walking over to it's based out of this church in my neighborhood, but not religious affiliated other than using their space. For me, I like dedicate um each day of service to like the memory of someone, or they don't even have to be deceased. It could be like I'm doing this with gratefulness towards whatever,
Mhm.
or I'm doing this in memory of so and so.
Mhm. So you explicitly like kind of set that intention for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What does that
S-
do for you, do you think?
You know, it's funny because like even though I go over with that intention, it's something that kind of no matter what, it takes like the act of being in there and like participating with people in your community who are like-minded, who wanna help. Like, when you think of, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, the bottom one, which is, like, the one that you address first is, like, physiology, like, making sure that somebody is, like, they've got their f what they need to live at the most basic level, and, you know, so one of those things is food at your most basic level, so, um, to be with like-minded people who wanna help out, wanna help locally, um yeah, I like to set that intention that I'm doing that in memory of this person for the good of my neighbors.
Mhm. How did that start for you as being a way to kind of do it in memory of your people?
Um, how did it start? Well, I it's funny, like, from the time I was a kid, um, you know, my mom started us off with, like, letting us know that no matter how much or how little you have, you can always give. Um And so, like, when I was young, I was a Girl Scout, and, um, my mom had taken us to go, volunteer at the, retirement home, and, I remember how much it meant to those people, but then thinking about maybe I was more secretly a morbid kid, just being like, "These people are not gonna be with us that much longer." And, and, my mom just telling us, like, how much, like, helping them make a card or reading with them or just listening to a story they have to share might make a positive impact, on somebody's day. So yeah, I think going in there with that kind of intent to, like, help people. The reason I got involved though with this organization, is my fiancé who just walked by. He had volunteered with them. Oh, no, you're good. You're good. He had volunteered with them when he was, between jobs and wanted to do some good locally as well. And then I briefly worked for Apple when I was doing my prerequisites, and they were allowed time to do some volunteer work, and I couldn't make the day that they were allowing, employees to volunteer, and then when I realized it was the same one that my fiancé was doing, I was like, maybe I should volunteer there." But, yeah, the the doing it in honor of someone bit, um, I don't know, maybe along my walk one day, I think I was just kind of, like, thinking about somebody from the past. And I was like, "I'm gonna do this to honor them today," like,
Mhm.
setting an intention along the way.
Mhm. And throughout the day, as you're doing that volunteer work, do you continue to feel that connection with them in some way?
I wish I could say yes, but no, it's usually along the way there. I don't, like I don't tune out while I'm there, but, you just kind of get involved in the conversation with other people, um, and, yeah, I think about them before and I think about them after, but along the way, it's kind of like you're busy working.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I maybe I should carry that through with me in the day, but yeah, it's definitely a before and after thing.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily something you should or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm just particularly interested in how, because you're talking about this volunteer stuff as a way, at least how I'm hearing it, as like a way of kind of channeling your grief in some way, a way of doing something with it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say it's a way I channel grief, but it's also, like, maybe doing things it it's a way to channel it by honoring them, by doing something good to help people.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and, like, I think sometimes with grief, you kind of wanna tune out at times, which is probably why, when I'm in the midst of it, I'm just like, "I'm doing this, I'm getting it done," um, and then when it's done, I go back to thinking about maybe whoever.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you feel any kind of, connection in whatever form that might mean to you with any of the people you have who have died?
I would say probably the most with my brother. Um, yeah, it's funny, sometimes I can talk about him and just, like, talk about him and not get all emotional like I am now. Um, but it's funny because 'cause I've never been religious person, and maybe this has nothing to do with religion, but I feel like he's a guardian angel. And sometimes thank you. You brought me Kleenex. But, I have, like, a really good story to kind of back that up,
Okay.
but I don't know, mm, if it's something, like, I want recorded.
Okay. That's okay.
Um, mhm. Yeah, maybe I can talk to you, like, off camera about it, but it's kind of a crazy thing.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. No worries about that.
But
Like, in general, what you're saying is there's a connection there with him, and it feels like he's an angel in some form or way, whatever that means to you.
yeah, I feel like he's looking out.
Yeah.
Or, like, I feel his, um I feel his presence for sure. Um, so, yeah, I think he's probably the one, like, who I think about the most when I'm trying to whether it's, like, volunteer for something that helps people in the community or setting my intention with going back to school for something that I felt where I could serve the community and be helpful and of service and honor a memory and do something that I knew he wanted to do for himself but never had the time.
Mm.
But it's not like living somebody else's dream either. It's something I had thought about, but sometimes financially or emotionally or whatever the reason might be, like, you might not be able to see it come to fruition, and then finally, like, having the courage to say, "I'm gonna put one foot in front of the other and make this happen." And I felt like he was almost like a guiding force with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It sounds really cool.
My ears turned bright red.
Mm. It if this isn't a question you're comfortable with, that's okay, but I'm curious if there is any belief system you have around death.
Um, hmm. It's funny because yeah, like I mentioned earlier, like, some people grow up being like, "Oh, if you're good, you're gonna go to heaven," or this, that, and the other, and I kind of almost even though, like, my mom's side of the family is Jewish, my dad's side of the family is Catholic, my whole thing was um just be a good person, and like if there is something beyond, hopefully you'll get there. Um but what matters is like what you do now, like while you can. Um so I don't know if there's anything beyond this. Um and so for me it's just trying to do the best you can, like here and now, regardless of whether there is something, because um yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Has that belief system been changed in any way because of your experiences with death, or has that stayed pretty consistent?
I think it's kind of stayed pretty consistent. It's definitely impacted um the way I view like some people, if they freak out over something that I don't think is that dramatic, I'll be like, well, nobody's dead. It's kind of like I'm like, we can I'm like, we can still like we can still make a change, and like the course can become more positive, or because no one's dead.
There's a theme that's come up throughout this conversation of that, uh, for lack of a better term, that like morbidity kind of that perspective of morbidity.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is fun.
Yeah, it's definitely like if I hear someone complain about something that's just doesn't seem like that big in the grand scheme of things, like I might not say that to them because I want to appear sensitive, and I think I am very like sensitive and empathetic. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, you can change this. No one's dead.
Yeah.
We've got time.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that.
Sometimes you just have to take the steps, and they might seem really hard from afar, but yeah, there's time.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe one more question here. If there if there was somebody who was very new in their grief, they just experienced a loss, is there anything in particular that you would say to them?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to talk about it.
Mm,
Um, or, or if you think that people don't wanna hear about it, maybe you can find your community of people who can or do wanna talk about it. Because I think I kept so much in for so long that I felt like I was a burden to somebody if I brought it up, or I felt like they would think that was depressing. Um And sometimes people would tell me like, "Oh, express it in your art." Because I went to, I was on a scholarship the first time around with college for fine arts, and I've always written music. And oddly, it's something I've never like I have keep it so separate from anything I do creatively. And I don't know why that is. I've never actually thought about it. But like I remember people are like, write a song about I'm just like, go fuck yourself. I'm like, I'm not gonna be told how to make my art or how I should grieve. So I think that's another thing too. Grieve it any way which way you want. Like you don't have people have expectations of you. Um and that reminds me real quick of a story kind of related back to this. Like when I took that week off of school after Franklin had passed away, I remember like my car was totaled, so I had to take the school bus again. Um, or as I fondly referred to it, the loser cruiser back to school. And my school bus got us there so early, like 45 minutes before class had started. And when you're a teenager, that 45 minutes of sleep makes a huge difference, or any age for that matter. So I remember getting to school so early and walking, um, like, just, like, walking the halls, being like, "What the hell?" Like, and I felt like some people looked at me like, "Why isn't she crying?" Like, people sometimes expect you to grieve a certain way, or show certain emotions or actions. And this girl who was one of my good friends in elementary school, Bianca, her and her brother, who were little assholes. I wasn't friends with them anymore at that point, but I remember walking the halls, and as I passed by Bianca's brother, Matthew, um, under like both of their breaths, they go, killer. And I remember turning around and looking them in the eyes and saying, "What did you say?" And they're like, "It was nothing." I was like, "It was an accident." And like, despite being one of the drivers involved, um, that's that stuck with me, obviously. I'm in my
Wow.
40s talking about
Yeah.
it. And then, like, I remember, like, somebody saying, like, "Isn't she sad?" Like, the same day, like, "She's not crying." I'm like and I remember saying to them, I'm like, "Do you want me to cry in English class right now? Like, do you want me to? Because I can."
Mm.
I'm like, "I'm probably gonna go home and cry." And, like, then being worried that people were gonna think I'm harsh because I was, like, speaking up for myself.
Yeah.
Um, and just I mean, there were, like, hearing people talk about, I don't know if you remember this, but they had closed down campuses in our district.
Yeah.
Um, and people like, one girl was so pissed that she couldn't get her curly fries from Jack in the Box that day, like a week or two later, and I just remember, like, I don't know, everything seems so trivial, like, the things that were upsetting people. And yeah, being expected to grieve a certain way and show people my sadness. And I think that maybe that's why I never included it in artwork, because I was like, I'm gonna do this on my own time. Um, and yeah, it it definitely impacted me having people in a school setting want you to be a certain way.
Mhm. And be judgmental of it and
Yeah.
mean. That's just cruel.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, wow. I'm sorry that that happened. That's terrible.
Thank you.
Gosh, that makes me mad. I wanna go back and punch them.
Yeah. I looked her up. She's I also Googled her in real time.
Mhm. Yeah.
I won't say any more about her,
Okay.
but yeah, it's definitely made me be a more empathetic person because I don't ever want anyone to feel the way I felt then.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense as far as your artwork, like, maybe you don't wanna put that on display, and subject
Yeah.
to other people's criticisms, or
Yeah.
judgment. Yeah. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I
You're
learned
welcome.
a lot I didn't despite having known you for most of my life, a lot that I didn't know also about
Yeah.
your life. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here with me, Laura Walton, and my incredible guest on Grief on Purpose. Your presence is a gift, and I'm so grateful you're walking this path with us. For more connection and resources, you'll find everything you need in the show description. To my guests, thank you for sharing your person with us today. It is truly an honor to know your story. I'm your host, Laura Walton. Until next time, be kind to yourself and remember you're not alone in your grief. We are here on purpose.